Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Just Another Esports podcast. Once again, you're joined by me, your host, Nicholas Shady Bacon, and my co-host, Mr. Kevin Hubris. This past weekend, we had the Toronto homestand event, the last homestand of the CDL season. So now we are moving into the postseason with playoffs. And we got to crown, I believe, our fifth champion. No, our sixth champion for this past weekend in the Toronto Ultra. They toppled the likes of Chicago, Dallas, and Atlanta. The only team missing from kind of the top four there is Florida. And they weren't in their bracket. They didn't make it out of brackets. So Toronto didn't get to claim, I guess, I don't even know what you would call that. They kind of already pulled off. Maybe not a grand slam. What is a grand slam in tennis? Is it three back-to-back events, or is it? It's not three back-to-back events for tennis. It's like the three major events or something, or is it the four major events? Because when you score a grand slam in baseball, it's you score 4 runs
Right.
because there's 3 on base
And then
and the
you get a
batter.
home run. Yep.
So
I don't know. You
in
you lost me
yeah,
with
all right.
tennis.
In some type of analogy, they missed the grand slam because it's kind of impossible to pull off unless Florida was in their pool, but they did something pretty damn impressive, to say the least,
That's
in
true.
their road from the bracket all the way to the finals and toppling the Atlanta FaZe in that finals. So we'll cover kind of the road of all the teams, where they ended up, as we have been doing in all the prior episodes. And so to start off the event, we saw the likes of the Atlanta FaZe taking on the Minnesota Rocker. And this was a swift 3-0 for the Atlanta FaZe over the Minnesota Rocker. They took the Ramazda Hardpoint 250 to 237. They took the Gunrunner S&D 6-1, and they took the Gunrunner Domination 173 to 158. And this was once again a really bad event for Minnesota, as kind of all of the events since we've made the switch to online have been for Minnesota. They just haven't been able to maintain the performance that they had at the start of the season into this new online landscape and format. And some of that maybe you can attribute to the online shift, but I think a lot of that also has to be given credit to teams kind of catching up to the way Minnesota was playing, and Minnesota was a bit ahead of the game maybe at the start of the season, as kind of the Paris Legion were. And so this is not looking good for Minnesota. Minnesota, with this loss and dropping out of the event 0-2, in Toronto winning the whole thing, Toronto actually catapulted all the way into 7th, and so they don't have to face New York right in the first round of the winners bracket in champs. Instead, Minnesota does, and that's pretty much going to be a death sentence for them unless they make some drastic improvements.
True. I've been saying it for how many weeks now, Nick? Not really to spite you, but definitely like I know you're a Seattle fan because all the guys you grew up watching are on there, and
I don't
it's
even like a lot of the people on Seattle.
you just like Seattle.
I
Okay.
liked the logo. I like the city. I like a
No,
lot of the people that are kind of behind that org. And I do like Apathy. I liked Karma. And
it's hard not to like Octane.
Octane's like, okay. He's not, I don't greatly like him. I don't greatly
You
dislike
know
him.
what? At the beginning of the season, I would have said the exact same thing. I would have been like, Octane's a good player, and I can respect him for that, but I don't really have anything to like. He doesn't really bring a whole lot to the table. But after this season, oh my God, Octane is, oh man, he's a real one, right? Like for sure. Like he's invited to every barbecue except for CDLs maybe because they're probably a little bitter. But he's invited to every barbecue. That dude spoke truth, and he went through like he went through the trenches. Like this was the year of so many good things for an AR player, and he had to suffer this entire year being the only productive player on that team, the literal only productive player on that team. And I'm still surprised that he's kept most of his sanity. I don't know. Did you see the video where he hit that 1v4 in S&D and then just shot all the bodies?
Actually, I think I was away during that
Oh
match,
my God.
unfortunately. I think I went back and I saw the replay of it, but
Yeah, it was in
yeah, it was a
it was in
pretty
the London home
crazy play.
series, And I mean, yeah, he absolutely just
They didn't win any S&D rounds after that, but
no.
it was still a really good play.
I mean, how many times does Octane have to 1v4? He would have had to do that a couple of times. I don't know. Somebody's probably gonna correct me in the comments, but he has stuck with it all, and he's just been being great on content.
Why are we talking about Seattle though when we're talking about we were talking about Minnesota? I just want to.
Wait, I thought you were talking about Seattle. Oh, the
No, we
first
said
game.
Minnesota. First game. Are you looking
See,
at the second
I'm
game
looking.
already?
No, I'm looking at the stupid Google sheet where you keep getting all the game orders wrong.
Oh,
Chicago,
yeah,
Seattle's
okay.
on the top of your list,
Yes,
and I
okay,
was like,
yes. So
oh yeah.
I'm reading off of EasyMax stats to get the rundown on like what the first matches were and everything.
Oh,
That's
okay,
my
I got you,
bad.
got you, got you.
Okay.
No,
That
okay.
that explains so much of why I'll be talking about a team and then you'll go on like this tangent on this completely other team that
Yeah.
I'll see like later in the list, but okay.
No, okay.
Yeah,
All
so
right.
so we're
So
talking about the Atlanta
yeah,
Minnesota.
Atlanta, Minnesota. All right. Yeah, no surprises there. Atlanta is well at the beginning of this event. They looked really strong. You know,
I think
3-0.
they went 3-0 in pools
Yes.
and then they went 3-1 against OGLA
No, they went 3-0
and
against
then
OGLA.
they went yeah, my bad. They went 3-0 against OGLA,
They
so they were
literally
9 and
went
0 going into
9-0
finals.
with all the momentum in the world, and Toronto clapped them. Like that's insanity. So this,
I don't know if
like,
you could say clapped them.
okay. Well, I mean,
Like
game.
you'll look at that. We'll get into that
True.
scoreline, but
True.
it was definitely not a clap by Toronto.
No, what I'm saying is like it. If I had seen Atlanta go 9 games up against everybody in the tournament, including Dallas and a good-looking optic, I would easily have given that to Atlanta. Probably in a 3-1, I would have been like, you know what, maybe Toronto got the first search or something like that, and it's their good map. But I don't know. Yeah, but the Atlanta Minnesota game, it didn't say anything that I really wanted to like see out of Minnesota, but it also didn't really doom them in my opinion. I think that Minnesota, like you're not wrong. For weeks they've needed to do something and they needed to make a change,
Actually, just well, they didn't announce, but Exceed is subbed in for GodRx in scrims at the very least.
which that I don't know if that's right or not. Like GodRx has been one of your very consistent players, except for during online, near like recently.
Hasn't been performing online, so maybe it's something with they think Exceed is going to be a better option in that scenario, but
I mean, that's
that's
really
still like
unfortunate.
it's crazy to think about that you're taking out GodRx for Exceed, who we've seen do amazing. Like people could say, oh yeah, well Optic they subbed out Dashy. Yeah, but Dashy hadn't been performing at all the entire season. GodRx at least was performing at the start of the
He was
season.
he was a top 5 player before he went to online. I'll live and die on that hill. He was a top 5 player before we went to online. Got RX, and now they're subbing him. I mean, it happens. Like Pristini was a great player for Florida whenever they benched him, even though in the beginning that was a personal reason for him. You know, he was dealing with some stuff, but like got RX, that's really tough. You
Yeah,
know,
so
like
that's extremely like worrying just going into champs. Like, can you like what the heck is going to happen to this Minnesota team? To be
fortunately
honest,
they have time to make adjustments right now.
like
Anybody
yeah,
right now,
they
if
do have a lot of time.
like
There's like what 3 weeks?
with how crazy teams have made radical changes this year and come out on top of it, because there was no roster mania. There was no, hey, by the way, after this roster lock and the players that you have are the players you're playing with. Right now, teams can be making changes, left and right, no problem.
There
And
was only one team trade that went down this entire season too. It was the Pristini to Chicago one, and Chicago didn't even trade
no, they
anything
didn't trade.
over to
They
Florida
just
too, which is another crazy thing. But this entire season it's just been rosters picking up players from amateur. There haven't been any kind of inter-team trades
now
inside of the CDL.
I will say that this year has been incredibly challenging because of COVID-19. So it may have been a more like let's focus on keeping the players safe and not trying to make anything absolutely drastic right now in the organizations. So the trades may have not happened simply because the logistics behind getting the trades going would have been very difficult. it's easy enough to pull a challengers player from a challengers team to the pro league. Like nobody's gonna be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna stick with my AM team. We got a 2K coming up, but not really a 2K. It's more like like a $20 gift card to Applebee's or whatever at the end of it all. To being like a pro player, the whole reason why you play this game, oh gosh, this game for 12 to 14 hours a day, it makes sense to pull people from challengers to the pros, but moving pros around, they're already there. Restructuring contracts, getting all of that, all of those ducks in a row, that would be a lot more difficult. And I think that logistically speaking, it was not feasible for a lot of teams. So I think that next year we will see a lot more trades, assuming that, the world isn't still on fire by then, which I'm not going to say anything, but I would imagine that next year will be a lot more fluid as far as players trading around. I would at least it makes sense rationally. It doesn't necessarily mean that teams didn't try, especially Seattle. I remember earlier on they said they didn't practice because they were trying to get some trades in. I don't know what happened there. Did you ever find out what happened there, Nick?
What with
Seattle.
the trades that they were attempting, or with
Yes.
just not practicing?
Well, not practicing was stupid. Like that was just them being lazy, I'm sure, and not
Yeah,
wanting to
I
play the
don't
game.
know who they were trying to pick up. I can't remember. I thought was Octane on the podcast and he was discussing how they were trying to make moves, but they couldn't, and so
Yeah,
I
that's
don't think he disclosed any names of people they were trying to acquire, but they were trying to make trades. I'm assuming with people inside of the league, if because I can't imagine that they wouldn't have been able to pick up AM players unless they were just like demanding too much money or something. It also there was another issue with kind of their cap space too. I think that was another
yeah.
issue that went along with
I
stuff.
I would love to learn more about that, about how cap space works in CDL, because I think that that's something really fascinating in other sports like the NFL, for example, where you
Yeah,
can't
because it's
just.
crazy to think that their cap space is like maxed, but you look at Chicago and they probably have the best 6-man, now 7-man roster in the entire league where you got Gunless and Jordan General on the bench.
Yeah,
Like,
which
how
is
is their
that's
cap
insanity.
space not maxed out? And if it is maxed out, they obviously have to be paying like some extra percentage, I'm assuming, because they went over the limit, and maybe Hex is just and Energy is just willing to pay that difference or that extra amount just to
Like
have like
luxury
that
tax or
lineup.
whatever. I,
Yeah.
I I don't know. I mean, you could also consider the idea that like Scump's probably not taking as much money as he would like to, because he makes enough money off endorsements and sponsorships and stuff like that. Kind of like a Tom Brady scenario. Like, yeah, Tom didn't need to take money because he was already getting too much from other places. If it helps the team win, then he can keep his side income rolling or even growing because he has a good team around him. And I think that's a pretty smart move if that were the case.
Yeah, maybe. But since we've been talking about, I guess, Chicago and Seattle, and you seem to really be wanting to talk about
Yeah, let's
Seattle,
do it.
we'll move to the Chicago Seattle matchup. And Chicago took 3-1 over the Seattle Surge. Seattle, they took the Gunrunner hardpoint 250 to 201 against the Huntsman. After that, the Huntsmen, they played an incredibly close Gunrunner S&D against the Surge, but they were able to take that in the end 6-5. Then Chicago took the Hackney Domination 170 to 139 and the St. Petro Hardpoint 250 to 203. So could have been kind of scary, to be honest, if Seattle also took that S&D Gunrunner, since their only good game mode has been their domination. However, it hasn't been the Hackney Dom. It's realistically only been that Gunrunner Dom,
Right.
which I believe they have a 7-1 record on or something along those lines. And then the other Doms are just average at best. Yeah, they're 7-1 on Gunrunner Dom. And then Hackney, they're 4-5, and St. Petro, they're 2-4. So it's really only that Gunrunner Dom that they're good at. And so you just ban that and they're kind of screwed.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because this was the event, or this was the match that told me right then and there that Chicago was not going to go far in this event. Even though Chicago pulls out a pretty clean 3-1 against Seattle, the S&D was not really that clean. Seattle is better at S&D than they are at hardpoint, but they're not really good at it. And Chicago has been a great S&D team with the acquisition of Persini.
Seattle's better at hardpoint than the RS&D.
And that's still not saying much because Seattle is not good at
They're
anything.
still god awful at both game types. I mean, you look at Seattle ended the season, the regular season, with a 13-26 record in hardpoint and
Gosh.
a 8-22 record in search.
I think near the end of the season they were starting to pick up search, and I think that was something you were saying. But yeah, like the fact that they've
Yeah, their
played this
search
so
was improving
closely,
towards the end of the season. I think that was probably due to Proto, but
I think it was due to Proto, and I think it was due to dropping Karma, who I feel like if you watch Karma play Search and Destroy, he's not necessarily the player he used to be. He's very objective focused. He usually picks up the bomb, and like he's just smart enough to know what to do with the bomb that he can make plays happen without killing anybody. So I think that that's not as valuable in this title, and I mean that's part of the reason why Seattle's S&D sucks, but it also sucked because they didn't practice. So anything that I really say for Seattle at this point is moot. What I would say though is if Seattle has any hopes and champs, and literally any hopes and champs, they better be practicing 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, every single day leading up to
yeah,
champs because
yeah. The teams that finish 11th and 12th in champs get $0. They don't get any money.
oh yeah,
So
no, they
deservedly so.
in both cases of LA and Seattle, I really felt like they really didn't try to go that extra mile with player swaps. Seattle not practicing is just I'm gonna bring that up probably until Seattle crumbles as a team. LA has performed just as bad, but at least they've been practicing, and I would say that a lot of their problems come from just very stale roster changes and not enough creativity in search and destroy in order to make big plays. Even in hardpoint, they just I
I think
never
they had a period of creativity in Search and
I
Destroy.
think
I
there
mean,
was a
they had
time.
they had a series of I think like 2 events where they were really good at Search, but then after that, it kind of faded away. And I don't know if that's maybe because they just decided, you know what, we're just gonna save all of our moves for champs,
That would be great.
or what? Because the thing that I don't I don't want to say the thing that scares me because I don't really have too much faith in this LAG roster. But you look kind of back at EG when they won World War II.
Oh my gosh.
They had one good event and then they were kind of crap. They barely even made it to like champs. Well, no, they didn't barely make it because I'm pretty sure
Every team, yeah.
every team that was a pro team made it to champs, but they were a bottom of the pack team because they ended up in Optics pool. So, but they were still able to go all the way and win the thing, and that's probably on the back of doing some very like maybe saving their inventory of strategy and whatnot. I don't know,
I
but you got Patrick Price still around. Well, he was released from the team, so I don't even know if he's helping anymore in kind of the coaching aspect. But
I don't think that Akes has the disposition to be a good coach. I think that he's always kind of maintained like this like hotshot player mentality, and I never thought once that a player like that could be a good coach. So
yeah, I don't know, like coach, more of like creating strategies to implement in rounds. That's
yeah,
kind of more like the position I could see him, not like a coach. Like Bevels is the coach. I think Bevels is a fine coach,
I think
but
Bevel's just fine. I mean, finishing 11th in a 12-man league is, or sorry, finishing 12th in a 12-man league is not great. I'm not 100% confident in Bevels like we might have been in the beginning of the season, but I think that they have room to improve. And you're not wrong. I think that it does come down to do they have enough creativity that they showed flashes of in the middle of the season to make something happen? Because past that, they're not going anywhere.
yeah, and so it's kind of like we kind of have a little bit of maybe faith that the Gorillas can do something at champs, but not as much. I think for this like Seattle lineup, since we haven't really seen any glimmer of hope throughout the season for
None.
this Seattle roster.
The 1v4 that happened in London was the best play and probably the only good
It
play
was the
that I've
pinnacle
seen.
of their season, was
It was
that
probably the height
1v4.
of their season was when Octane got a
The highlight
1v4.
of their season probably should be them making it to one semifinal. They made it to a singular semifinals, but
Yeah, that's true.
that play, that 1v4 by Octane is probably a pretty good second.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well,
You ready to move
we
on?
could talk about Toronto Optic. That'd be kind of fun.
I mean, that's kind of jumping ahead.
What's the
Well,
next
not
game?
okay. We still got to talk about Mutineers Dallas.
Okay,
Okay, that's
we
still a matchup. All
okay,
right,
yeah.
all right. Okay, we're talking about Mutineers Dallas. Then
Dallas
we'll
and
get
Mutineers.
to Optic Toronto. All right.
Fine.
So Mutineers versus Dallas. Dallas took this 3-2 over the Mutineers, where the Mutineers absolutely destroyed the Dallas Empire in the first two maps. They weren't even close, and somehow Dallas Empire, they're able to very closely take that game 3, and then they were able to take an extremely close game 4 and 5. So this was probably a matchup that the Mutineers should have won the first time around, but they were unable to kind of clutch up in the end, and Dallas was able to pull off that reverse sweep. So the first mat was Gunrunner Hardpoint. Florida Mutineers took that 250 to 127. Then they took the Arklov S&D 6-1. After that, those where the Dallas Empire's reverse sweep starts. They take the Hackney Domination 159 to 154. They take the Ramazda Hardpoint 250 to 215, and then they take the St. Petrograd S&D 6-4. I think kind of the highlight for me this event for the Florida Mutineers, even though they still beat Minnesota, as we'll see later on, they lost to the Dallas Empire twice to get eliminated from this, which is kind of an unfortunate scenario. Their pool was incredibly stacked, and I honestly don't think they would have fared any better if they had matched up against FaZe. Since they faced Dallas twice, the reason being is because Dallas got 3-0'd by FaZe, as we'll discuss once we get to that matchup. But this first time around, Florida probably should have won, and kind of the key player for me in this weekend, really for this lineup, was Havoc. He had a really bad weekend on this Florida Mutineers lineup at a 0.78. Everyone else was positive on his team. Pharaoh was at a 0.12 or a point.
0.12.
Yeah, a 1.2. Pharaoh was at a 1.2, not a 0.12. That'd be really bad. Holy cow. Pharaoh was at a 1.2. Frosty was at a 1.01. Awakening was back to his usual self, I guess you could say, at a 1.23. And then Skies was at a 1.12. Havoc 0.78. So Havoc had a really bad event this weekend, and he hasn't really shown kind of a level of inconsistency that we may have said that he would have had at kind of the start of the season. Pretty much since they brought Awakening out of the roster, he's been pretty consistent in his
True.
performance. And so I think this was probably just one bad event for him. I'm not going to put too much stock into this into these losses versus the Dallas Empire. But Florida, they are going to be in Dallas' side of the bracket. I think Florida might still have the head-to-head. Maybe is Florida 3-2 for Dallas, or are they both 2-2? Because they're both 2-2. Then that's going to be a really fun matchup if we do see a rematch of Florida versus Dallas at
Oh
Champs.
gosh, I couldn't tell you. I mean, we could look through it, but I mean that kind of be dead time. But
I'm not gonna waste my time looking through it.
I think this match spoke about how Dallas needs to play with some sort of edge, and I really thought that they went in there thinking, okay, Florida's hot as shit right now. They're probably cheating. Clay probably said that, by the way. If we're gonna really set the mood here.
Clay said Clay said it
Well,
probably sarcastically that they're cheating.
oh yeah, well.
I mean, Crimsix during his interview, he's like, he had the aimbot kind of thingy going.
Oh
in
yeah.
his interview, and he's like, "This is what Awakening screens looks like."
Yeah.
I mean, afterwards, he was like, "If anyone actually thinks that, you're stupid." But
I think that Dallas came in there and they didn't play with that edge that they need. The dark brooding Dallas Empire. I don't
actually,
know.
wait,
Maybe
Dallas has beaten Florida 3 times now. I think they're 3-3
I think they're
because
three
they
and
beat
three.
them at the last one.
I think what
The last
happened
tournament they
was
were both at.
after game two, they realized they were on the 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi and they needed to switch to the 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi. I think that's I think that's really what happened.
They
It's an
decided
internet joke,
they
Nick.
called up Astro. They were like, "Hey, what's up? What's going on with that? The router, the sixth man."
Yeah, Astro got off the phone with the FiOS or whatever, and he's like, "Oh my God! All right, is it any better, guys? Now?"
All right, but that was I guess there's not really too much kind of else to say there. It
I
was
I
two
think
really
that
good teams.
no, I think that we couldn't possibly predict who's the better team between Florida and Dallas at this point. Dallas looked great this event. Florida's looked great in series before going into champs. It's who knows. A lot of these teams, it's hard to say what's really going to happen because a lot of these teams they didn't play their A game strats this event. If you did, then you had something to win from this, like Toronto or Seattle. A lot of these teams, Chicago, Atlanta, Dallas, Florida, they couldn't care about this event flatly. They couldn't. They have champs. They're focusing on champs. They're going to hide all of their strats. They're going to make sure they aren't playing anything that's just, you know, too cutting edge. So that way, when champs comes, they have some secret plays and they can make some clutch ups happen. So I wouldn't put a whole lot of stock in this Florida Dallas match or the next one.
Yeah. All right, now we're going to talk about that Optic LA versus Toronto
Yeah.
Ultra matchup. Toronto Ultra took this 3-2 over Optic Gaming LA. They took the first Ramasta Hardpoint 250 to 182. They took the Piccadilly Search 6-4. They lost the Hackney Dom 158 to 148. They lost the Hackney Hardpoint 150 to 208. And then they won the St. Petro S&D 6-4. So this is kind of Toronto's road to the finals was kind of once again paved in the same and similar way that Paris's was on the back of their stellar S&D play.
Here's the thing. It's hard to say what this match actually looks like, even ignoring the fact that this is right before champs. It's really hard to see what this matchup actually looks like because Toronto did extraordinarily well this event, and Optic also did really well this event. So looking at the fact that they went 3-2, it at first was like, okay, well these teams haven't really gotten any better. Like Toronto and Optic are fighting against each other and they're kind of close. Oh well, back in the soup you go, boys. But the stat line's a lot more impressive considering that Toronto did just beat Atlanta in this finals and Dallas in this finals. Oh, and did I tell you they also beat Chicago in this finals? Like, or sorry, in this series. Like, then things start to like kind of click. The gears start to turn, and you think, oh man, this game actually meant something. And this is why I was actually really excited for this because this tells you a couple things. First, Toronto, the adjustments that they've made, they feel really good about it, and they're going to come in with a little bit of confidence into champs. So I think that regardless of what's happened before, now they're in this headspace where they can go up toe to toe against teams like Chicago, Dallas, and Atlanta. Optic is kind of in the same area, even though they took an early exit in the semifinals to Atlanta. They still had a great tournament, and the additions of Hollow and Draza have really, really, really helped. I mean, they're basically the superstars on the team now, and now TJ Haley can ride on the coattails of somebody else on the way to victory. Oh, not to mention Slasher. Yo, Nick, Slasher, Austin Litigoat. Am I right?
What about him?
What do you mean? What about him? Just all right. So read off some of the stats of Slasher real quick, just so everybody's aware.
Okay.
Because
Like,
Slasher had an unbelievable event. He was lights out.
did he though?
I think he did.
So their overall KDs, the top two performers on the Optic Gaming roster was Draza and Hollow, both at a 1.02,
Right.
Slasher at a 0.94, and then TJ at a 0.89, with Kenny at a 0.87.
You know what's funny?
So
Kenny's 2 years removed from being the MVP of the Call of Duty League, and this year he's done really nothing.
he's had a really bad season. Kenny has. didn't do bad last year though. Would say like it. I don't know. It's just something with this Optic roster. They're just not able to kind of put on kind of the performance that they have been able to in the past. So I don't really know. Like even Slasher hasn't really. He had a couple of good events when Sheena was on the lineup, but yeah, I honestly don't know. I could not tell you.
I couldn't tell you either. But I know that like Hollow Draza and Slasher all had a really phenomenal event. I mean, yes, 0.94 doesn't sound great. 1.02s don't sound great, but they did play really well against some very tough teams. Not to mention that I'm sure
Yeah,
that
it might have been I wasn't paying too much to Slasher. I was more curious in how kind of Draza and Hollow were performing, and throughout kind of the S&Ds, they had some stellar clutch plays, the dominations, the hard points. They were making very smart plays, rotations, and sneaky plays, kind of like in the dom to really clutch up for the team. Like these new guys that they added to the roster really are kind of showing their worth in
oh
this
yeah.
league, and so
No, I
I
think
think the addition of them, even if like Kenny and TJ aren't performing to what they should be, it at least gives me some hope for this team at champs. And like you could even see it this weekend. I mean, we'll get to it later, but they beat Chicago, and so that's not an easy feat there. And so what's going on?
no, I
Toronto and Optic making like the last surge for like that eighth place spot. Toronto was able to come out on top. Like both of these teams, they needed to
they
make it to set. Like Optic needed to make it to semifinals, which they did. However, I don't think they expected Toronto
Toronto to win it.
to be the team that made it to the finals and even won the finals. So
No, I think that this was a tournament that really mattered for Toronto and Optic.
the performances we got of them from was awesome. The storylines were awesome. Every match like for them was that involved them was just great because it's like they need to win this.
Yes. And to see Optic go out so early against Atlanta kind of makes me feel like they almost threw that. Maybe they felt like they if Toronto won against
There's
them
no
in the
way they
finals.
threw that.
You don't think they threw that? Oh, well, no, I
I
guess they
do
would get more
not think
points if they
so.
got second. Yeah.
There's no way they threw that, especially like Slasher is
But
not the kind of player to do that,
true.
especially with kind of how annoyed he was, I think, after the loss. I mean, he went on Twitter and was like, "Nameless, get me on the podcast. Let's go. I'm ready to like rant about something. I don't know what
Right.
because
Well, it's
they didn't get bullshitted this weekend, to my knowledge. I mean, they
no.
just got beat.
I think they got clapped pretty hard by Atlanta, and that's what I was
I mean,
about
Atlanta
to.
was clapping everyone though. Like it wasn't just you. So
Right.
they
Well,
3-0 Dallas. They 3-0 Minnesota. Like, what do you want?
yeah, that's true. Atlanta was clapping everybody except Toronto.
Yeah, well,
Except
we'll talk
Toronto.
about that.
Yeah, we will
We'll
talk
talk
about
about
that.
that.
That was pretty
But
interesting.
are we done? Do we want to move on to I guess the Saturday matches?
All right, yeah, the Toronto Optics. It's talk now. Let's rotate.
Yeah, I got the prediction right though. I said Toronto was going to take it. So I had a flawless Friday. You did not. However, you definitely had the better predictions kind of for the rest of the days throughout the weekend.
Yeah,
I
that's pretty nice.
I definitely did not, but I still get that flawless Friday. I'll take that. The
There you go, Nick.
next matchup that we had was Atlanta FaZe versus Dallas Empire. As we kind of briefly just said, Atlanta FaZe 3-0'd the Dallas Empire. Was a really close series. Really, really close. The first three maps were all Gunrunner. We didn't get past that, unfortunately, but Gunrunner Hardpoint, Atlanta FaZe took 250 to 219. It's only a 30-point difference. Really close. Gunrunner S&D, Atlanta FaZe took that 6-5 over the Dallas Empire. That's around 11. That's as close as you can get. And then the
Yep.
Gunrunner Domination, Atlanta FaZe took that 160 to 155. So only a 5-point difference. So that was also really close. Like
Uh,
this was just a really close competitive series. And so like if we saw the rematch, would it have gone to 3-0 again? Probably not.
no,
But this
absolutely not.
time around it did.
No, I really do think that it came down to very little moments in all three of those games, and it's just Atlanta was able to clutch up at the perfect time. It felt like Dallas had a control over it, and then all of a sudden, like Atlanta had the game. It was truly impressive to see. They really did stick it out, tooth and nailed at each of those rounds, and the 3-0 line doesn't really kind of convey that normally. Normally, when you hear 3-0, you think, oh, they got blown out. Like it wasn't even a competition. This was seriously like probably some of the best Call of Duty, and I really hope that this is champs because I would love to see them go a full 7, like go the distance. That would be unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these series were pretty tightly contested. I mean, you look at the Toronto Optic one, even this like 3-0 between Dallas and Atlanta, all those were really close. And then moving on to our match 6, Chicago Huntsman versus Toronto Ultra, that one was also incredibly close. That one went to a game 5 as well, where the Chicago Huntsman lost it in the end. But to Ramasta Hardpoint, the first map, Chicago took that 250 to 228. That was really close. Gunner S&D, Chicago took that 6-5. Incredibly close. Hackney Dom, Toronto Ultra took that 161 to 157. Incredibly close.
Yes.
Petro Hardpoint, it was not close.
Mm-mm.
So Pristini unfortunately DC'd from that matchup. And
Oh man.
so Chicago Huntsmen, I believe, lost that 250 to 58, but they were playing 4v5. So not even going to count that really. That was just a forfeit. We're just going to count it as a forfeit.
Yeah.
And then the Piccadilly Search, in the end, Toronto Ultra took that 6-4. And oh my lord, we talked about how not clutch, but like throughout the entire season, we're saying Toronto is playing these teams so incredibly close, but they just can't clutch up in the end. This event, Toronto finally got the ice in their veins and started clutching up time and time again. And some of like the plays and strategies they were pulling out were really not like unique, but fun to watch,
They were.
especially on like Piccadilly. Like Piccadilly, they were running like a 2 sniper setup, which I think is becoming more common now on that map. And they're a pretty scary 2 sniper setup team when you like at least like just a 1 sniper team with Cammy. Like, oh my lord, that man with a sniper is scary.
Oh yeah, he was lights out.
Absolutely terrifying.
Especially this event. Oh my god, it just seemed like he could do
And
absolutely no wrong behind the scope.
I don't think Chicago, like they have Formal's a sniper and Formal's a good sniper, but I don't really think they can contest these two kind of like a 2 sniper setup on Piccadilly because no one else really like stands out to me. And Formal already, like even though he's a really good sniper, performance of like the top ones, you're thinking Simp, you're thinking Cammy, you were thinking GodRx, but now you're like
Weskins.
thinking Weskins. Like those guys are probably the top 3 snipers in the game. I'm thinking I can't think of anyone off the top of my head, but holy cow, yeah, they're definitely extremely scary team. At least Cammy's an extremely scary player with the sniper in his hands. Like
Right.
honestly, if you're to like probably contest who's the best 2 snipers in this game, it's between probably Wuskins or Cammy, honestly.
Honestly, yeah, it might be Cammy. Weskins has been playing great too, and that's like a huge compliment to me. But after this weekend, I'm telling you, I've never seen somebody snipe better in Call of Duty Modern Warfare than Cammy this weekend. It was a sight to see. If you guys didn't watch it, I would go back and watch all the Toronto matches because just the S&Ds alone with Cammy. Oh my god.
They were
Um,
all so close too. Their S&Ds were so close. So all of their S&Ds, they ended up the weekend with a 5-2 record in S&D. I believe I already said that, but every S&D went to at least around 10, except for the one that they lost against Atlanta, which was a 6-0
right.
in the finals. But every other S&D outside of that went to round 10. The clutch factor that Toronto showed this weekend, it was so impressive, but it's also kind of worrying for this team going forward is like all these matches were so close to them losing. I think that's also incredibly evident in the hard points that we'll see kind of that we saw on the Saturday, which we'll discuss. But I'll mention that now. The 2 that they won against Dallas, they won 250 to 247 and 250 to 244. And then the one that they won against Atlanta, they won 250 to 247.
Yeah, the hard
They
points were all
only like
insanity.
they only won by 10 points total. Like between their 3 hard points that they won on Sunday. So,
Everybody
I
knows
mean
that
that's
it really does come down to the last two hard points, though. In any game, the last two are the
in this
ones that
game it really does because there's so many kind of flip-flops between which teams are getting a full 60 on one hard point and then giving up a full 60 on another one. And so
right.
I'm starting to kind of grasp when teams are kind of in that nervous state, I think, because it's like, okay, once you reach 220, if both teams are at 220, the team that got to 220 last is probably going to lose simply because the other team's probably already rotated to the new hill.
That's the thing is that this game has been so heavily dependent on the rotations that anybody who casually plays the game hardpoint, they know how to rotate now. That's how impactful this title has been for just rotating to the point. Half
I
of
mean,
half of
players are pretty much sending one guy to rotate to the new hard point at the start of one hill and then just attacking the one hill like 4v5, at least on some of them. Like St.
some of
Petrograd,
them,
I
yeah.
think is a prime example, but
Oh yeah, especially when you go from hazmat all the way to back bar, like that is such a silly rotation. I mean, you're running for at least 15 seconds. You're like tack sprinting, slide canceling for 15 seconds to get
I
the
mean,
barrel
3
across the
hard
map.
points are on that side of the map too, so you might as well just stay on that
Right.
bar side of the map. Like just don't even go for P1 or P3. Just stay over there. You can like you'll get all the time you need. I guess like pushing to P5 is a bit hard. Like that rotation's a little hard, but
I mean, so with a lot of these, I think what's more important is that you have an idea of there's this much time left on the old hill. Do we want to stay there or do we want to chalk that and head over? You see a lot of really, really quick math being done in those last two hard points because every game feels so close. It's like, oh, it's a blowout. It's 200, 120 says I don't know, Maven or something. And all of a sudden it's 200 to 180 and it's a nail biter and it really just comes down to who rotated better. It really does come down to the last two hard points.
yeah,
It
route
rarely
man gets
doesn't.
paid.
Yeah,
Man, those rotational players. And so this is like another thing. The top KD players in this game, like you saw in one of the stats that was posted on Twitter. Octane, I think, had the best KD in hardpoint. However, his team is 13 and 26 in hardpoint. So I feel like too many people give a lot of stock to these AR players when I think the AR players, honestly, the person I'm picking up last if I'm building a roster. I'm going to get myself 3 incredibly dominant sub players and then a good flex player. And then the last person I'm getting is honestly an AR because the sub players, I feel like they have the most important role in the game in my eyes because one or two of them, they're going to be the player to make the rotation plays first. And they're also going to be the people breaking into the hill first. So you need them to be like the best players on the team.
generally.
I honestly think you can have a pretty mediocre AR and still be fine if you built an incredibly solid roster of SMG players and a good flex.
No, I 100% agree, and that's why the MP5 is still relevant, even though it gets absolutely toasted by M4s, because you need that mobility to play Route Man, to play entry sub, to play Slayer, or anything like that. The mobility is really what makes it a viable option and something that you're required to have in hardpoint. Movement around the map will always be the most important thing when it comes to hardpoint, and suppressing movement or suppressing anything like that, spawn trapping or what have you, will always be really powerful because of that.
Touching back on the Chicago Toronto matchup, Chicago they DC'd in that map 4. Pristini DC'd.
Yes.
They did not get a replay.
Nope.
So
Because
Seattle, whoever, can stop complaining and whining. Oh, if Chicago Huntsman DC'd, they'd get a replay. They
maybe
didn't.
maybe that's what happened.
CDL has been incredibly consistent and strict with the rulings. So I don't want to hear anyone crying wolf like, oh, the Chicago would have gotten a replay if it was them. No, well, they didn't. Proof's
Yeah,
right
they
there.
they
So
definitely did not get a
at the
replay.
very least, the CDL has been consistent. Like I just wanted to touch on that incredibly briefly because I know there were people thinking that and saying that,
No, and
and
you
I
know what?
truly didn't believe it.
You know what? Chicago handled it better than any of them because you know why? They just kept playing. They were like, you know what? It's a 4v5. Let's just try to win. And it wasn't great, but at least they didn't pull out AK-47s and start shooting walls. So,
Yeah,
you know,
they knew they weren't getting a replay. They realized that they didn't have some absurd ego or something, some reason they were thinking they were getting a replay. Like Chicago must have read the rule book, and none of the other teams must have because they knew to keep playing.
well, even if they didn't, they could just watch any time that any of this happened, and they're like, well, I mean, they didn't get a replay, so chances are we probably aren't either. So there's that, and then afterwards, there was really like no backlash from them. I mean, they were salty. I would be salty too, but I
Yeah, I
mean,
think they were more pissed off at the Hurricane than they were at the CDL.
yeah,
Like, dang
absolutely.
it, Hannah.
Hannah Montana got him,
No, no,
got
please,
Pristini.
gosh. The next matchup, not going by what's probably you're looking at, but what
Yeah,
I'm looking at is Florida Mutineers versus the Minnesota Rocker. Florida took this 3-1 over the Minnesota Rocker. Interestingly enough, this series was somewhat close, you could say, in the
true.
hard points. The Azir hard point, Minnesota Rocker, they took that 250 to 244. Then Florida Mutineers, they took the Mazda S&D 6.5. They took the Hackney Dom 186 to 132. And then they took the Mazda Hardpoint 250 to 226. Yeah, the Rocker, they're not a good Dom team. They're a really bad S&D team. They're the third worst S&D team in the game. Honestly, I'd probably put them as the second worst S&D team in the game. I'd probably move New York up into that third worst S&D team. This is based off kind of their entire year-long round win-to-loss record, but
Right.
you look at Minnesota, I think they're only 0.1% better than New York in their total round win-to-loss, but I believe their record is actually a lot worse. Like New York in S&D, they're 17-20 in S&D. The Rocker, they're 11-25.
Yeah, they're not a good search team. Back when
They're
they,
actually the second worst S&D team if you go by like their win to loss record and not by their round win to loss record. If you go by just like the
straight win
games that
loss.
they've won.
I
Yeah.
all right, this is gonna sound wrong at first, but I don't think they're a bad search and destroy team. I think they are a slow search and destroy team, and I think a lot of that had to do with how they tried to play around GodRx in a lot of their searches. So maybe the change will help that. It's hard to tell. It always is, and there's a reason for that. You know, the players or well, the staff doesn't want other people to guess why they put Exceed in for GodRx. If I were GodRx, yeah, I mean, I'd be a little peeved, but I don't know. I
Do
think
you
this,
think it could be an issue with kind of the coaching? It just feels like the Rocker have become really stale.
they have become really stale. You're not wrong, and I think part of it does have to do with coaching. I think,
Because like when I think back to the Black Ops 4 season, you look at kind of the first event, maybe even like the first two. I can't remember how good E United did at like the second event, but at the first event they got second. After that, they kind of fell off really, and they didn't even really do too great even when Simp came in. And then afterwards, like they got rid of Bryant State. They brought in Facento, and they saw, I would say, a kind of a drastic increase in performance after that. And so I don't know if maybe Saints, he feels like there's kind of one correct way to play the game, and he gets kind of stuck in that mindset,
good.
and the team just doesn't attempt to innovate after that. And maybe that's what's happening with this Rocker roster, as well as kind of a decrease in performance.
It definitely could be that, and that would be a concern because that means that you have really no hope in COD champs. That being said, I do think that they have skilled players in the right positions. I think ASIM is probably one of the best route runners in the game, and I mean they used to have GodRx, and he's probably one of the best man ARs in the game. But we'll see how the shift helps or hurts or what have you here at champs, I guess.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see kind of what happens to their S&D pool as well, since I don't know. I'm pretty sure Exceed can snipe. I'm pretty sure he has sniped on the past rosters he's been on. But taking God or X's sniper out of your bag of tricks for S&D,
Yeah,
your pool of strategies, definitely could hurt them and might force them to kind of change the maps that they are comfortable on and want to play in that. So it'll be interesting to see what search maps they do end up playing at champs.
yeah, they could end up being just a run of the mill gun runner search team that doesn't really snipe that well, and more power to them. They might lose a little bit of an edge in Piccadilly search, but then they can just they can ban properly for it. It's going to be interesting to see pick and bans and how that works with champs, because now with all the statistics, thanks to Easy Mac, should be pretty black and white as far as who's good at what. And
Yeah. Rocker aren't a good gun runner search team. They're 1-7.
yeah, they're not currently. Let's just say that. Who
Yeah,
knows? Who knows?
currently.
As far as their beautiful Floridian opponent, the Mutineers, this was actually not the best showing for them, just in general, tournament wise. But this match here was iffy at best for them. I don't feel like they played out of their minds in this event, or sorry, in this match.
Yeah, the Ramazda and the Hackney were really good, like a 6-3, and they blew them out in the Hackney. But the hard points were really close. That's obviously Rocker's strongest game mode. It's the only one they have a positive win to loss record in.
But Florida's also been
But
really strong in hard
yeah,
points as well.
Florida, we expect them to kind of blow them out. Not
Yes.
blow them out, but we expect it to not be as close as it was. I would say kind of on those maps.
I mean, I think Florida did fine, all things considered. They did pull a win out of it.
Yeah, I mean they won 3-1,
And
and two
in
of the maps weren't even close.
in this grouping with Dallas and Atlanta in your group, Minnesota had no like a snowball's chance in hell at getting out of this.
Yeah,
And
Minnesota was screwed.
and Florida, Dallas, and Atlanta are all very, very solid teams, and any of them could have made it to the playoffs. It
They're
just so
all top
happened.
three teams.
It just so happened that Atlanta was playing lights out this event, and so was Dallas. So
Yeah, and I mean Florida, they they just weren't as good as Dallas and Atlanta, but they were still up there. Like the matches they played against Dallas, like even looking at the 3-0 that we'll cover with them against Dallas after we cover the Optic Seattle matchup, like that series was also pretty close. But before
it
we get
was.
to that, we'll go into the Optic Seattle matchup since we just didn't really have any hope for Seattle. It was a 3-0. They Optic took the gun runner. The gun runner hard point, it was kind of close. It was a 250 to 232. But like watching it, I didn't ever feel nervous that Optic wasn't going to win that against Seattle simply because, like, as you were saying, once you kind of start watching the match and you start kind of seeing which teams are getting which 60 seconds on which hills, you can kind of end up figuring out, okay, well, if they keep on trading hills like this and they got this much time on the first hard point, then by the end of the game, this team will probably win by like this much.
Yeah, I mean, like
I
I
think a
said,
lot of these matchups actually come down, especially on Gunrunner, is how much time a team can get on the first hill.
the first hill is a critical hill, and I say this to everybody. I know that it seems like just they leave out of there and fight for P2, and there's like 10 whole points on the board, but it is such an important hill. Even
Yeah,
getting
because
those few seconds, it can mean the world. We stress a lot about the P1 to P2 rotation just in general, but the P2 to P3 rotation from warehouse to coal is also a really, really hard
yeah,
fought
and teams
position.
are holding down Cole for a full 60 seconds. Warehouse, honestly, out of the two, so out of like the hills, like obviously the middle one's gonna be contested, but
Yes.
teams have been starting to like rack up time on that by forcing other teams to need to like rotate
Yes.
really early, and so they kind of focus their attention on the rotation instead of on that first hard point. But I feel like Warehouse is potentially the second easiest hill to break outside of like the first hill. Well, outside like if we're okay, so the third easiest to break. It would be like P1, P4, P2, P3, and then P5,
Think
maybe.
think P5 is the hardest to break?
I don't know because
That's
the
warehouse.
thing with the yeah,
See, P5 is the hardest to break right now. I think that P2 is a lot easier to break now. I think that
Yeah,
people
that's
like
that's what I was saying.
I think P2 is a little bit easier to break now. It's not that much easier to break. I think people have just gotten a lot better.
Yeah, well,
Getting
it's
that
the
top control
one.
is really
It's
important.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to get like parallel spawns on PT. It's like easier to contest, maybe not break, but it's easier to like contest
It
and
is
ensure teams
a
don't get a lot of time on that hill.
100% easier to contest.
Whereas it's a lot harder to contest minecart and warehouse P5.
Yeah, I think
So
warehouse is still the hardest one for sure, and I think that with how difficult warehouse P5
we did
is,
see some teams this weekend absolutely like just break setups instantaneously on warehouse. Like I'm pretty sure I can't remember which team it was. Maybe it was the Optic Chicago matchup where they were just really easily able to break Chicago's
I
setup
think
in that warehouse.
I think that's the only way to break it though, is right at the very, very, very beginning, whenever they're just trying to get set up, and the spawns are more ideal for whoever gets the rotation. But like instantaneously, everybody's on the map right there, and everybody's probably in warehouse or in the front of warehouse because you had to make the rotation from P4 to P5. You don't really have anybody sitting in the back. Because of that, if you can just get a couple quick kills in the front, then all of a sudden you have the point, and oh wait, you're all there. They're gonna spawn. You're gonna get the rotations, or sorry, you're gonna get the spawns for it right away, and then they're stuck on a rotation on a bad spawn for them because they spawn outside of boiler, like as you're running towards coal. That's where they usually spawn you. That or like backwoods. That's insanity for a spawn. And then you have guys who spawn literally in the back of the map and then just have to hop up onto like a garage, and then all of a sudden they're on the point. That's where the disparity is in P5. If you can break it instantaneously, then you're good. But if you can't, then yeah, I mean you just lost a whole 60.
There's also so many things to look at because there's so many things you can climb on. I mean, all these maps are jungle gyms,
Right.
and I hate it.
Did you see? Oh
But
no! All right. So did you
I
see where was it? Donnie? No, 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 no. This was Toronto. This was this event. Somebody hit the fan in Gunrunner. Speaking of Gunrunner, somebody hit the fan in Gunrunner in showers and then threw a nade out of it like a Simtex during search.
yeah, no, I've seen that. I've seen that early into the game.
Really? You saw somebody do that
Yeah,
beforehand? Oh, okay.
yeah,
Well, then what do I know then?
yeah. No, I saw that early into the game. I can't remember. I think it was like I think it was like the second or third event I saw someone do that.
Pretty slick little grenade toss though.
Yeah, I mean, I think it took me like 2 years to learn about the one on hijack that you can throw down the vent. I
Yeah.
never knew that.
You didn't know
That one
that?
was crazy.
That
No,
one was
that
pretty
took.
nuts though.
I mean, that's cool. But what was I going to talk? I was going to talk about something
Uh,
that was related to the hard. Oh yeah, yeah. I'm wondering if like because hard points weren't like this in the past. Like I'm thinking in recent we've had all the specialist abilities to really help break hard points, and that's why these hard points are a lot more contested because you use an ability to break it, and then you're probably getting like a parallel spawn or something, or you get a good spawn, and then another team uses their ability to break it, and then they're getting the good spawn, and so it's a lot more contested, I think, because of those abilities. But like when we look back at, I guess what was the last game that we didn't have specialist abilities was Black Ops 2 that had hard point, or I guess no, World War 2. Were hard points like as crazily like full 60 on one, 0 on the next
no,
in
because
World
you
War
had.
2? Like I can't really remember. I don't think it was.
You know why? Because you had fucking score streaks. You
Oh
had a
yeah,
way.
that is another factor too to help
You
break
had
kills.
something that you could just be like, "Yo, I'm just gonna throw a bunch
So
of big bombs
do you
on this."
think the reason that hardpoint is kind of like this, where teams are getting a full 60 on one and 0 on the next, is because of this game, or do you think it's because more so because like we don't have score
It's
streaks and we don't have specialist abilities?
it has to do with the fact that it is just gunfights left and right, and I
Do
can
you think
never
it's
get behind it.
100% that reason? Because like I know we had score streaks in Black Ops 2, but I think like Black Ops 2 hardpoints, most of them were indoors
Right.
to my like
Well,
remembrance
it's not about
of them.
it's not
and what
about
maps were competitive.
hitting the point necessarily, but it could be like disrupting like back spawns or suppressing a lane or something like that. Like
Yeah, that is true.
score streaks can do a lot for you, and you can always save them up for the hills that are outside or anything like that. Like that was usually what I did in Black Ops 4. I would always just wait to see if there was an outside hill and then use the score streaks then, just dump them. So I think score streaks have a lot of different various purposes. It's not just, hey, let's try to get a triple kill real quick. That's always nice when it does happen, but sometimes it's just, yeah, I just don't want you being on, this bomb site or something, or I want you to go like realize clock's ticking and you need to run to another point, or you need to rotate differently, or there's a lot of things you can do with a score streak. So I think score streaks are a critical component to Call of Duty, and I think that's really what's made this a little bit more boring to watch, is because there's never been like that superstar. All right, yeah, let me pull out this laptop. All right, shoot my jet, missile off and
Yeah, I
kill
wonder
three
how
guys.
pros feel about it, because I know, like, obviously last year, pretty much every score streak was GA'd or banned outside of two, the Hellstorm and the
Yeah,
Lightning
Hellstorm and
Strike.
Lightning Strike.
But like, I wonder if they think removing score streaks entirely is a good change or a bad change. Because like at the start of the year, I could see him like, okay, yeah, there's no score streaks. I can kind of see how that might be interesting or fun. But
No, score
looking
streaks.
at kind of like the negatives that have come of it, at least for Hardpoint, like Hardpoint specifically, since that's like kind of what we're thinking is causing these to be like full 60s on one, 0 on the next. I'm really interested to kind of hear what pros think, because with these changes that we're thinking kind of is the result of not having score streaks, we definitely need score streaks back. And not kill streaks. Kill streaks suck. Score streaks.
Yeah, I think that score streaks are critical in CDL, or well, in any sort of pro league for Call of Duty, because you do so much more on the map other than get kills, and most people run around a 1.0 KD, so you aren't going to get kill streaks. Just it can happen, but chances are it's not going to happen. Plus, it
It's
rewards.
just not a good way to play the game.
Well, yeah, it rewards slayers, and you need
Well, it
to.
doesn't even reward slayers because, like, at least not in like a pro setting. Because, I mean, we've seen some crazy streaks in this game. I like Envoy. I think he went on like an 11th streak last weekend. We've seen a bunch of high
Yeah, I've
streaks.
seen a couple tens, for sure, and yeah, they do happen, but when they do happen, it it normally is because the Slayer is doing that.
Yeah,
So
I feel I just like score streaks so much more. At least like not even like talking about competitive, but in just casual, kill streaks are such a bad thing, I think, for the game because it encourages camping and not playing the objective at all,
true, I
which is
agree.
fine, I guess, for TDM,
Right?
but any other game mode just kind of stinks.
No,
And
I
they
agree.
could even do something where the amount of score required to get a streak fluctuates for whatever game mode you're playing. Like that could be a thing. Or they could just reward
Well,
less
they already do that.
score.
They already do that. Like if you capture a hard point, it's worth a certain amount of points. You can't get those points unless you're in hard point, right?
Yeah,
If you get like
I'm
a
I'm
defense
talking
kill or
about
an
like
offense
I'm
kill.
talking about like okay, a UAV in hardpoint costs 400 points,
Oh,
but in TDM it's 300. Or something like that, so that or a kill in
no,
TDM
I
is
would
worth
want to throw.
150 points, whereas in hardpoint it's only worth 100 points. Something to balance it so it's not like crazy, because what was happening was, or what's really easy to do is just buffer the hardpoint to get your streak, and you
Right.
don't even like you're like kind of playing the objective, but you're like not getting any kills or helping your team out in that aspect. But I
No.
don't know. That's probably like a whole basket of worms
Oh
that we
yeah.
can discuss at a
Ba-
later date. But
basket of worms. We have baskets of worms now.
yes,
Baskets.
and this all started from talking about Seattle and Optic, and I think I'm done with this topic. If you are,
Yeah, we've already reached basket of worms level, so
yeah. So we're gonna get rid of the worms. Actually, we're fishing for the Mutineers. Get those worms back. We're fishing for the Mutineers. They couldn't fish a win against the Dallas Empire, though, this past weekend, as they lose to them again, this time in 3-0 fashion. Once again, though, it was a close series. They lose to Gunrunner Hardpoint 250 to 211. They lose to Gunrunner S&D 6-5. That was the closest one. All these ones are not a blowout, but they're like not as contested. They're a comfortable win for Dallas. And then the Hackney Dom that closed out the series was 164 to 142. That was not our last Saturday matchup. Our last Saturday matchup, though. Did you have something to add to that point? Because we already talked about Florida and
We did.
Dallas.
We did already talk about Florida
Oh,
and Dallas. I don't really have too much to that. No, I'm much more interested in talking about semifinals, and I think the last big talking points that I have are finals, really, because
okay.
you
I
know.
heard you like breathing in there, so I didn't know if you were going to say something.
No, I thought about it. Well, what I was thinking was with how quickly Dallas took them again, it kind of puts it into perspective. Like, maybe Florida isn't all that right now. Maybe Dallas is a lot better than Florida.
I think with the no, maybe not with the first win because Florida still could have, I guess, won
No,
the
that
event.
was like the very first one. It could have gone either way. This one felt
Yeah, no,
a
I'm saying with
lot.
the very, I was thinking like in the second rematch, it didn't matter if Florida won because Dallas already secured as many points as they needed to secure their second place spot, unless obviously if Florida Buccaneers won the whole thing. But it was going to be incredibly difficult for Florida to get second without, like, they needed to win the whole event to get second
Right.
over Dallas. Maybe they had the head to head. I'm not sure. I think with the first win that Dallas got over Florida, yeah, that put them at a point where Florida would have needed to win the whole event to pass Dallas. So at this point, they might have just been conserving energy or strats, or they just didn't care. I don't know. Or Dallas was just that strong. Who knows?
Could be a multitude of things for sure.
I mean, also Havoc was playing really bad, so that was another thing.
Yeah, Havoc was playing historically bad for sure.
But moving on to the second upset
Run.
of the Toronto event was Optic beating out the Chicago Huntsmen
Oh my
3-1.
gosh. That
And
meme. That meme. Oh my god. Did you see the meme?
show me the real
Yeah,
Optic.
show me the real optic. Oh my god, the
Yeah,
controversy. Now, like, yes, while
I get it. I just hope they don't keep on doing that because it took them all the way to now to beat them. And like, if they continue that meme into next year, it's just like, all right, just stop. It's not good anymore. It's just bad. Like you can do it once, maybe twice if they somehow rematch at champs, but after that, no, just stop. Just stop at that point. You're beating a dead horse. It's not a good joke or funny after that, but
I didn't like it was funny to take a dig at like the old optic boys because they're a bunch of, shysters and they like to talk a bunch of shit, all of them. Like that's fine. Nobody was safe there, but like to go at Hector like that, like that dude literally made Optic Gaming. And you're gonna say that he's not the real Optic?
yeah.
That is his whole
Yeah,
brand.
maybe keep. Yeah, probably would have been
The
smarter to
creator
keep
of Optic
Hector out of
Gaming.
that.
Yeah, no, the Hector thing was dumb. If they had done, I don't know, if they had done the Optic Gaming roster with Dashy too, that would have been funny. But yeah, and like they definitely went a little too far with that kind of sore winner mentality, which made me feel a lot better that Atlanta 3-0'd them pretty easily in the semis.
Oh yeah, they destroyed him. The thing with this Optic gaming roster though, like I felt this throughout kind of the entire year, is they play teams close in hard points, even though they're getting kind of destroyed, in all honesty. And as soon as I saw this Azir hard point versus the Chicago Huntsmen and how close it was and how just blown out it was, like the kill differential was between these two teams. Like if we go back and we look at the box score for it, I believe they got outslayed by like 20 or 30 kills in it. Yeah, they got outslayed by 18 on Azir Cave and they lost by 18. So it's not like absurd amount that they got outslayed by, but 18 is like a still like a reasonable amount still. I mean, you had Kenny at -10 and you had TJ at -11 on that Azir Cave. And they only lost by 18 points. Like after that, I got really nervous for Chicago. And they ended up losing their Mazda S&D 6-5 to Optic. And then they lost the Hackney Dom 168 to 141. and then they lost the Hackney Hardpoint 250 to 218. So at the beginning of the year, we said, okay, this Optic Gaming roster, they absolutely suck. Like they're losing everything.
Right.
The one thing they weren't doing bad, the one thing that was always really good was their true engagement, like success rate. Even though they were one of the worst teams in the league, they had the best like team average engagement success rate. And I feel like that's something that's pretty consistent with these slasher rosters that he kind of conjures up, is that they always play the game in a way that even if they're maybe not winning in the kill differential, they're still making the game incredibly close and maybe even winning. And this is something that I've always had an issue with on rosters with Scump, is they'll outslay by a ton, but they're never winning by a lot. At least in like some games. It was so prevalent in Black Ops 4 where they were just absolutely destroying teams on the map, but they were barely winning by any points. And I think like there was one stat when I went and looked at like the roster, not the roster, the Optic lineup for kind of, I think it was their dominations maybe. Was it their dominations or was it their hard points?
For Optic,
Yeah, so for
probably Dom.
Optic, yeah, it was for their Dom. For Optic, their Dom, they're 12 and 15. So they have 15 losses. On average, with their average KD in domination for their losses is a 0.86, and they're only losing on average by 14 points. Like, that is crazy to me. That on average, they're only losing by 14 points, which I think is the lowest in the league for like the average amount a team is losing by. And other teams, I mean, well, like here's an example. New York, on average, when they're losing by 25 points in Dom. And their KD is a 0.95. Like Optics has a lot worse average KD in their losses, and they're losing by a lot less. And that's something that you'll kind of see across, like even if you like look at kind of their hard point stats. And I made this stat sheet public, not to edit, but to view on my Twitter at Shady Bacon if you want to take a look at that. But that's one thing that I really noticed with this Optic roster, and that we kind of been feeling, somewhat seeing with them throughout the course of the entire years. Even though they're not winning and they're getting outslayed, it's still scarily close.
True. I think that Optic can be a sleeper pick for champs. It's crazy to think of that, and I don't think it has anything to do with any of the guys that originally started on that team, other than maybe Slasher. But hey, they honestly could be going far in as champs just because they've always been pretty consistent with domination, and they've definitely stepped it up with hardpoint and search, and that's really all it needed was just a little bit of a bump up in the two major category or two major game types, and I feel like they're really really close. I don't know if they're there yet, but they definitely looked pretty good this event, and even the last event, and I could see them getting that chemistry down before heading into champs.
Yeah. So I was right in saying out of every team in the CDL, Optic in their losses and domination have the smallest differential in score with the lowest KD. So
Yeah,
that's
unbelievable.
impressive.
Yeah, no, it really is. And I just think that it comes down to just playing the game better.
It comes out to clutching up. It comes out like we saw at Toronto this
True.
event. They clutched up. Optic, they just need to clutch up and get a couple more kills in hardpoint if they want to win. They need to stop getting outslayed by as much. But we're going to move on to our Sunday matchups. First one we saw was the Toronto Ultra versus the Dallas Empire. And this was a stupidly close series outside of the one map that Dallas won. And so that's kind of what we're going to see between this Toronto. But pretty much every Toronto matchup, the ones that they lost were blowouts. The ones that they won were stupidly close. So the Gunrunner Hardpoint, they won that 250 to 247. The St. Petro S&D, they won 6-5. The Hackney Domination, they lost 196 to 123. And then the St. Petro Hardpoint, they won 250 to 244. Like, what the hell? They get absolutely destroyed in the domination and then narrowly win in the search and 2 hard points to beat the Dallas Empire and advance to the finals. Like, oh my lord. They had not even ice in their veins. I don't even know, like liquid
nitrogen.
Yeah, liquid nitrogen. They were Dr. Freeze or whatever from Batman.
Mr. Freeze.
Mr. Freeze.
Mr. Freeze. He didn't have his doctorate.
He didn't. He might as well have with the crazy science stuff he did. But yeah, they're Frozone. They were Frozone. That's
Frozone.
A cooler guy. All I can think of when I think of Mr. Freeze is the really bad Batman movie that came out where Arnold
Schwarzenegger, the Governator was him.
No, yeah, we'll just say Toronto Ultra. They were Frozone this event.
Where's my super
and
soup?
They clutched up. Yeah, they found their super suit and they put it on.
Soup. They found the super soup. It's all good.
They were the super ultra this weekend. Oh my, yeah, but
they were cracked.
Toronto clutched up.
Sunday, what they did was they cracked open their Mountain Dew game fuels provided to them by their very, very generous sponsorship. They took a scoop of G Fuel and they threw it in there and then twirled it up with the reclosable lid, and then got straight cracked. Went right to work on Sunday.
That sounds absolutely disgusting.
I'm sure it's not far from what the truth is. So
I have never. Maybe some people do that. I have no clue. But Toronto, they clutched up. I think we kind of really. There's not really too much to add on to that. It's just kind of. The whole match can really be kind of disclosed in that scoreline. Toronto, they were just able to clutch up at these very minute points in the series against Dallas to be able to take that win. So kind of moving on to our second semifinal, which was not close. It was the Atlanta FaZe 3-0ing Optic Gaming LA. Comfortably took a St. Petro Hardpoint 250 to 207. Comfortably took a St. Petro S&D 6-1. And then comfortably took a St. Petro Domination 153 to 135. So St. Petro. And that was the end of the road for Optic Gaming. They end the season in 9th. They're not able to pass up the Minnesota Rocker, or they were able to pass up the Paris Legion. So Paris Legion moved down to 10th. Optic Gaming LA ended up in 9th. And because Toronto made it to the finals and won the finals, they actually jumped over the Rocker into 7th place, crazily enough. And so that's the match that we'll be talking about now, which was the Atlanta FaZe versus the Toronto Ultra in the grand final. And you said, oh, yeah, FaZe, they clapped everyone outside of Toronto this weekend. I would even say they clapped Toronto in this finals. They just didn't win when they needed to in the end. You look at the first matchup, the Gun Runner Hardpoint. Toronto took that 250 to 247. Again, they won by 3 points. 3 points, man. You go map 2, Arklov S&D, they get absolutely destroyed. FaZe close them 6-0. They don't get a round on the S&D.
Yeah, you don't play around with FaZe on Arklov Search.
They go Gun Runner Domination. Toronto win that 165 to 157. They won by 8 points there. Gunrunner Dom was close. Ultra take that. The next match, the St. Petro Hardpoint. Atlanta FaZe take that 250 to 143. Not even close. I think that was the first match this weekend where the opposing team didn't. Okay, well, no. Yeah, I think that might be the first match this weekend where an opposing team did not make it into the 200-point mark in a hard point.
You know what's funny, though, is that at this moment, you've got to be thinking as Atlanta FaZe, like, all right, so we just absolutely annihilated him in the hard point, and we just 6-0'd him in the search. So Game 5 should be a no-brainer, right?
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
It wasn't. Toronto Ultra take the St. Petro S&D 6-5 against the Atlanta FaZe. And it was off the back of who has been kind of the joke of most people, kind of like last year. You look at Methods and how he left COD Champs last year, getting absolutely destroyed by Caesar Skies in a 1v1 S&D.
Oh man.
They almost knock Luminosity out of the bracket, or to keep them from advancing to the bracket. Like, he just needed to win that. And he, like, Skies was toying with him that entire 1v1 at Champs. But oh my, like, you had two amazing plays from Methods in this one. One being the 1v2. It wasn't really a 1v2, but it was a 2v2 at the end. Him getting both kills at the end since his partner got traded. But so it was technically, I guess, quote unquote, a 1v2 at the end that Methods won to secure the win. But even before that, the balls on the man to ninja defuse a bomb that Major Maniac was looking right over, pretty much. He just couldn't see his little squirrel head defusing that bomb. Oh my god. And he got into the bomb site too without dead silence. He literally just walked up to the bomb after Major Maniac had ran away and started defusing to stick it instantaneously. Oh my gosh.
Perfect timing. That's what you were
Amazing.
talking about.
Like, absolutely amazing.
The entire event was
Toronto just
completely
clutching
on.
up.
Yeah, just all Toronto clutching. You know, you don't have to watch any of the rest of the match. Just watch any of them that Toronto won in like the last 5 seconds of it, and you've watched the entire Toronto home series.
Literally just watch that St. Petro S&D, and you pretty much have watched the entire home series.
Yeah.
That's how every single one of Toronto's games. Maybe you need to watch the Arclov S&D and then the St. Petro S&D.
Oh my
because
gosh.
that's kind of the story of how Toronto's entire event went.
Yep.
But,
well, this one's chalk, boys. We'll just get them in Game 5.
yeah, it's a absolute craziness. So Toronto, they're the 6th team to win a homestand event, the 3rd team to defend a homestand event. And with that, I believe they catapulted themselves all the way from 10th into 7th with that event win, crazily enough. And so at the end of the regular season, you have, I need to bring up the scores real quick, because I want to give the points too, since that is somewhat significant, since there were some tiebreakers and there were teams that got the head-to-head against their opposition. And so if we go to the standings real quick, in first place, you have the Atlanta FaZe at 280 points.
Yep.
In second, you have the Dallas Empire, 260 points. In third, you have the Florida Mutineers, 230 points. Tied with them, you have the Chicago Huntsmen at 230 points. However, Chicago Huntsmen will end in fourth since Florida owns that head-to-head. I believe they won every single one of those, so Florida has a 3-0 record against the Huntsmen. In fifth, a whole 90-point difference, you got the New York Subliners at 140 points. In sixth, you have the London Royal Ravens at 120 points. They're the only team in the top 6 not to win a homestand event. Directly below them, you have the Toronto Ultra, also at 120 points, but London Royal Ravens had the head-to-head against them, so Toronto Ultra will be in 7th. Minnesota Rocker, also tied at 120 points, will be in 8th. I'm assuming because Toronto has the head-to-head against the Rocker? When did that happen, actually? That's really confusing. Because I thought the Rocker, I know they beat Toronto at their first homestand event. No, the Rocker beat Toronto at the opening event, the launch weekend. So when did Toronto get 2 wins against Rocker, I guess, is the one question. But whatever. I'm just going by what I see here on the CDL website. In 9th place, you have Optic Gaming LA at 100 points. Below them, tied at 100 points, you have the Paris Legion. Optic owned the head-to-head against them there, so they're going to be in 9th. Paris Legion are going to be in 10th. In 11th, at 50 points, you have the Seattle Surge. And then in 12th, with Optic Gaming, with the LA Gorillas, the other Los Angeles team, also at 50 points. You have them at 12th. Obviously, Seattle owned the head-to-head simply because they were 4-0 against the Gorillas before the Gorillas finally got a win against the Surge. So a lot of ties outside of the top 5. You got a 3-way tie for 6th, a two-way tie for 9th, and a two-way tie for 11th. So some craziness there, I guess, in kind of the standings and how every single match really does matter for those standings. So
Right.
props to Atlanta, Dallas, Florida, and Chicago. 100% the top 4 teams in the game, a huge 90-point gap between them and 5th.
Right.
So undoubtedly the best teams. And then undoubtedly the worst teams throughout the entire regular season were the Surge and the Gorillas. There's a whole 50-point gap between them and Paris. So congratulations, I guess, to the top 4 for kind of being the best teams throughout the entire season. And going back all the way to the beginning of the regular season, we gave our predictions for where we thought the teams would end up by the end of the season. And we were pretty close for a lot of these. The 2 biggest switch ups being where we thought Florida would end up and where I thought Seattle would end up. And I guess you could probably even say where you thought OGLA would end up.
Right.
So going back to our preseason, end of the season predictions, you had Dallas in first, ending the season in first, with Chicago in second, Atlanta third, New York fourth, London fifth, OGLA sixth, Seattle seventh, Minnesota eighth, Toronto ninth, Florida 10th, Paris 11th, and LAG 12th. So out of that, you got Minnesota's placing right. You got them right at 8th, and you
Right.
got LAG right at 12th. Me,
And what's funny though is like if you just shift down a couple of those, then it's all good. That I have a whole block of them where it feels pretty right. So I guess New York and London, I'm just off by one.
yeah. Going to mine, I said Atlanta would end the season out in first. That they did, so I got that one correct. I said Dallas would end the season in second. That one correct as well. I thought New York, oddly enough, would end the season in third. I can't remember why I thought that,
Their
but
roster looked really solid in the
it looked
beginning.
really good. But I feel like there was like a little something magical to that New York lineup for some reason that I thought they would do like really well. I mean, they did. They ended up in fifth. It just took them a while. It took them, what was it, like 4 events to finally get there.
And a roster
They
change.
needed me to lose all faith in the roster by subbing in Happy for them to finally do something.
Yeah, I mean when they got Mac Melts, the team transformed and now they are a very very strong
They
contender
went
for
from
champs.
12th to 5th.
Yes.
They were the last place team before the switch to online and before they picked up Max Melts. They went all the way from 12th place to 5th place. So pretty big change from them there, but I got that one wrong. I thought they would end up in third. They did not. I said Seattle would end up in fourth. I was really, really wrong there. I thought the roster was going to stay the same throughout the entire season. Yeah, I could not have been more wrong with what happened with Seattle. I just don't know what to say. I honestly do not. Like, you look at Enable, you look at Apathy, and kind of you look
Karma,
at Slack. You knew they would have sucked at
Octane.
the beginning of the season. You knew they were going to be. You knew Slack was going to at least be decent by the end of the season, and you knew Apathy and Enable would be pretty darn good by the end of the season. However, that didn't happen. Karma retired. Enable got benched.
Early.
Slacked in Apathy. Apathy, like, at least showed a bit at some of the events, but he's still not playing to the caliber that I know he's capable of. And
True.
they brought in Proto and Pander, who just weren't up to the task, and then you got Octane just being Octane,
Being
so
Octane. Yeah.
which is not enough to win.
No.
So yeah, I was really wrong with that one. 5th place, I had Chicago. I'm proud of realizing that I knew that Chicago roster was not going to stick together. I knew there was either it was going to implode at some point in the season, and I was right. It imploded a lot less than I thought it would, but they still made a roster change. So
Yeah, I don't think that
I'll give it to myself there.
I don't think the roster change was an implosion as more it was more or
Yeah,
less like the twins wanted to play together, so Hector made that
yeah.
happen. Like that felt
It wasn't. Yeah,
right.
it wasn't necessarily an implosion, but there definitely was. Maybe not. I don't even know how you want to kind of describe it as the word
Well, I
The word
mean,
kind of is fluttering
they
away. I
just
don't really.
they knew that Gunless had to go because he wasn't showing up to scrims. He was torching, like he was not taking it seriously, and that's never
Was
good.
he torching? Was that? I thought it was
Yes,
more so kind of the not personalities clash, but kind of you have Scump and Formal who want to keep practices extremely fun, and
right.
you have Gunless who's a lot more kind of serious and rigorous
Well, yeah, and
with
I think
practice.
I think that's always going to clash too. But I mean, it also came down to the fact that Gunless was streaming super late at nights, and he was not showing up to practice on time. And turns out, like, as much as Seth Abner likes to say he doesn't take practice seriously, like he still wants to practice and wants to make sure everybody's there on time. He's basically a married man now. Like, his time's not predicated by himself anymore. He's got somebody else that controls that for him.
I don't
Um,
know about nearly a married man, but he's at
he's
least
got
been
a
dating
house.
someone
He's
for a
got a
while.
solid girlfriend. He's got a dog. Like,
He's got a
he's a
house, a dog,
lot.
and a girlfriend. He's pretty much married.
He. I mean, yeah, actually.
All right.
He's the age for it, just about. Was 24?
People are getting married later these days.
You're not wrong. You're not
Yeah.
wrong. And I think that it could happen down the line. But mark my words, it's
Yeah.
the
Who
the the
knows?
the, the point still stands. Scump, he does not own his time anymore. He does not.
Yeah.
So, he's got other stuff to do. And anything the Scump wants is like LeBron James. Anything LeBron James wants, LeBron James gets. So, Scump says, you know what? Gunless guy, gotta go. Too serious to practice. Whenever he shows up, Hex is like, all right, well, what are we doing? Made the next logical decision. I think it was a smart move on the Huntsman, and I don't think it was an
Yeah.
implosion
No,
thing.
I think it was a good move
Do I
too.
do I think that they have a chance at champs? We'll see. I don't think they're gonna win
Yeah. It
champs.
kind of depends on if we see the Chicago that we've seen. Chicago is a very like flip or flop team. It kind of feels like when you think of Chicago, you don't think of an inconsistent team, and I wouldn't say they're inconsistent. They have a really high peak, and then they're just slightly above average when they're not playing to their peak.
I will
Like that's kind of where they're at
I will say this
as a
though.
team. Like they're not going to lose to the worst teams. They can play like fifth and sixth really close or something, maybe seventh and Optic as well, since I think Optic's probably better than Minnesota right now. But they'll play the middle of the pack teams close if they're not playing at their peak, but then they can also beat the top of the pack teams if they're playing at their peak is like the thing. So they're inconsistent in the fact that they're not always at the top of their game, but the bottom of their game is other teams' ceilings. Is I guess what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
yeah, no, you're definitely not wrong. And here's the thing though, is that like we're talking about champs here. We're talking about when it's time to get down to business, to get serious. If anybody knows Scump, he he's a pretty laid back, relaxed guy, but when it comes down to, championship Sundays, he shows up to play. So I you know, they could do it.
Yeah, it's not outside the
But
realm of
it's not
possibility.
outside the realm of possibility. But do I think they will do it? I don't know.
That's to be discussed in a
That
couple of weeks.
that is true. It is to be discussed in a couple of
Yeah.
weeks.
But so Chicago, I said they would end this season in fifth and in fourth, so I didn't get that one right. I said London would end in sixth. That they did. I got that right. I would have gotten the next one right too in saying Minnesota was going to end up in seventh if Toronto didn't win the freaking event, but they did that to spite me, so I didn't get that one right. Minnesota ended in eighth instead of seventh, so I didn't get that one right there. OGLA, I thought they would end up in eighth. They ended up in ninth. Florida, I said they would end in ninth. Not even close there. They ended up in third. Toronto, I said they would end in 10th, and they would have if they hadn't kind of really showed up and clutched up this weekend. They moved all the way from 10th into 7th, as we kind of said.
Yep.
So that's where they ended up. And then Paris, I said they were going to be 12th. They were 10th. And LAG, I said they were going to be 11th, but they were 12th. So almost could have gotten 4 of those right.
Yeah.
I did not, however. And so
Yeah.
but
You also
I
had Seattle in fourth, so shame on
yeah,
you.
yeah. I shamed myself enough already by discussing my utter failure in my Seattle prediction. Okay, we get it. It
Like,
was really bad.
there's a difference between me saying like Florida's a 10th place team in the very beginning because chances are if they didn't do anything, they probably were going to be a 4th place team or sorry, 10th place team. But Seattle at 4th,
Yeah, I mean, well, speaking of like Florida's roster, they they made a lot of changes,
they made 2
and we
changes.
were. I think the one biggest thing that surprised me with Florida's roster is I remember in one podcast I said we'll probably never see an iteration of this roster that doesn't have the duo of Havoc and Mox, and lo and behold, I think like maybe an event or two after I said that, and like they brought in Pharaoh and they took Bersini out, they took Mox out.
They did.
So like,
They like no holds
and it was
barred.
it was the right decision. I mean, they went on to win back to back events like shortly after I think or directly after
Yeah,
making that change.
directly
So
after it, Awakening's very first 2 events as a pro player were 2K final champions. Like that's unbelievable. Like I
yeah,
don't know if that'll ever happen again. You know, like that much impact as a rookie. Dude's been lights out, regardless of cheating rumors or whatever. The dude has been playing lights out COD. He is one of the best players in the league. I cannot believe that he's just been sitting around playing challengers.
dude,
Um,
the old guard is just too stuck in their ways, man. I'm so happy we're finally seeing a lot of these AMP players get a chance. And I mean, you look at a lot of the lineups, the AMP players are kind of the best players on their lineup. Awakenings, probably not the best since you got Skies there and you got Pharaoh, who's probably a close rival to kind of contest that second place spot on that team. Not saying like Havoc and Frosty do a ton of work on that team, and so I don't want to discredit them. But like, what if you're just looking at kind of like the slaying capabilities or whatever? Awakening is one of the top performers on that roster. If you're just looking at that stat, like obviously there's a lot of untangibles that Havoc and Frosty bring to the roster with kind of the position that they're playing. But as well as you kind of like just this past event, you look at Draza and you look at Hollow. They were the best performers on OGLA this event, and honestly, like the past event too. Mac Meltz on the New York Subliners
yep.
for a good number of events. He was the best performer on that team until kind of the rest of the team really started to kind of pick it up. So bringing in these rookies, it worked for worked for pretty much all these teams really.
Yeah, I think
I don't like can you think of a roster that didn't work for outside of I guess you could say
um
LAG?
yeah, I mean you could say the Gorillas, but at the end of the day, I mean, I think the Gorillas just had far too much to work on to really
Yeah,
capitalize on anything. I
they
mean,
didn't really have a solid base to begin with, like with kind of their core lineup. So
I'm trying to
I
think.
think like one other thing I do want to talk about with kind of speaking of rosters is the Toronto roster because this was the only 10-man lineup that we saw throughout the CDL. They're the only team that has 10 players
Yeah,
on
they
it,
took advantage of their entire
and
sub roster. Yeah.
yeah, and they made a bunch of changes throughout the entire season with the starting lineup, not roster changes with the starting lineup. They didn't make any actual roster changes. They just changed who was starting. And on the podcast, Nameless and Pac-Man asked Methods who makes the decisions. Is it up to the players? And Method said no, the players don't have realistically any say in the matter. It's all up to the coaching staff. And Nameless and Pac-Man kind of found that really weird, and for good, I guess for good reason, because in the past, players have pretty much dictated who is on their roster. Like the coach doesn't really have any control over the roster, like who gets picked up, who's getting benched. It's mostly kind of the player's opinion. And I really like the fact that Toronto did not do that, that it's entirely up to the coaching staff. And here's why. If they're going to make this 10-man roster work and rotate the starting lineup, I say starting lineup, if they're going to rotate the starting lineup, they can't have the players making those decisions because if the players are making those decisions, there's going to be a lot of resentment if they need to bring a player back in or who's getting subbed out and who's getting subbed in. And they're not going to be a cohesive team of 10. They're just not if the players are making decisions of who's going to be starting and who's not. And so it makes complete sense for the coaching staff to make these decisions. and not the players. And I think that's something that a lot of teams need to start doing is when you're building a roster, yes, leave it up to the players. Who do they want to play with? Who do they want to get? But throughout the season, I don't think the players should be deciding who doesn't play and who does, because that causes a lot of inter team turmoil, which you don't want, especially if you're not going to be making drastic roster changes, but instead shifting people around in the starting lineup. And they did a ton of, like, they changed their starting lineup a ton throughout the season.
Right.
And every single time they made a change, the iteration always looked better than it had in the past.
True.
Like, even when they were taking out one player and bringing back in another player. Like Metals, he was in the roster at the start, then he was out, and then he was back in. And there wasn't really any crazy dip in kind of the performance that we saw from the roster throughout kind of the course of the season with kind of the changes they were making. They were always playing teams really, really close. They could just never clutch up in the end. And I think that has a lot to do with just the coaching staff making that decision in the end, is testing things out, not leaving it up to the players, leaving it up to what they see and what they're gathering from practices, from the matches, and ultimately making the decision on which starting five will be their best option moving into champs.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think that Toronto has consistently made improvements throughout the year that has pushed them to, I don't know. I really do think that Toronto is a contender now. I don't know if they're going to be one that is going to make it all the way, but Toronto definitely looks like they have at least something going on. And at the beginning of the season, I couldn't say that with confidence at all. You're right. They have made changes slowly throughout time to try and figure out, all right, what's the best possible route to to run this.
Yeah.
Who's playing hot, who's not.
And
I think another thing that is undervalued is this kind of keeps the competitive integrity within the organization. You have 10 guys that are all vouching for 5 spots, and that in itself brings, a competitive standard internally that you can't get anywhere else. If anybody else was trying to scrim internally, they would have to pull from AM teams or challengers or something like that. Toronto already has a full 5 guys that are willing to take places if need be in champs. And that in itself is going to be incredibly valuable going into COD champs, is having that ability to not play other CDL teams if they don't want to, and keep all of their strats kind of hidden.
yeah, that's another great point to bring up, is we could see a whole crazy amount of tricks coming out of the Toronto playbook come champs in S&D. But like, I don't want to get my hopes too much on this Toronto Ultra roster, simply because they had to clutch up so much
True.
to win this event. But they were doing it. They were doing it. So we've seen potentially their ceiling, and it just is if we see that same ceiling for them at champs, or if teams are just able to surpass that ceiling with their own, is kind of the question that we are now going to have. But Toronto, they were the first group to really do this 10-man roster thing at the beginning of the season. Every person was saying, this ain't gonna work, there's too many pieces, they're all over the place. And honestly, it would be amazing if they won champs, simply because of like the storyline that would be. Like, no one believed him at the start of the season. Like, they were saying, oh, this 10-man roster, it's ridiculous, you can't sub players in and out, that's just not how it works. Like, so like, the thing that frustrates me the most with kind of the COD landscape is that a lot of the people in it are just so fixated in kind of this mentality around kind of how things should work, and they're not really open to kind of like these creative ideas. You see it every now and then. Like, you saw it kind of with Seattle and Joey Nubsy subbing Enable out for Search and Destroy, bringing Panda in. You saw something really cool there that no other team has utilized. You see it with Toronto Ultra and their 10-man roster, but you don't really see it with a lot of these other teams. And if you were to ask other teams, they'd be like, nah, that's crazy, that's a stupid idea. But eventually you just need to kind of figure things out that other teams aren't doing that can work for you and potentially give you the edge to beat them. And so I really do hope that kind of the competitive landscape of Call of Duty continues to evolve and doesn't get stuck in kind of an age where there's just nothing new happening. There's no evolution
Right.
of kind of like how rosters work and how teams are using the ability to make substitutions and whatnot.
This does add a new aspect to it, and I think this is going to make things a lot more interesting as the league develops and teams start to get full up. Because I'm sure that there will be a lot more of a push for acquisition of talent going into next year. Will it be the same as Toronto? No, but I could definitely see, you know, valuing like two or three subs on each team, so that way you can start to make changes midway through without having to, sacrifice a lot of like trading or something like that. Also, having subs means that you do have, you know, players that can be traded, and you can kind of feel that way around as well. So it'll be exciting next season, hopefully, and we'll hopefully get to see more of that, because that is something that I also really missed because of COVID. Thanks, COVID.
Yeah. But I'm not getting my hopes too much for Toronto. I just really kind of do respect what they have done kind of with their roster kind of throughout the season and how they're managing who is starting and who is not. But I think that covers everything that we wanted to cover in this episode. I thought it was going to be a lot shorter
Psych.
since we weren't going to do predictions.
We
It
still
was
have.
not. I apologize,
Don't
but
apologize.
we may have two more episodes before champs. We're definitely going to have at least one. On that episode, we should have a special guest, Mr. Josh Salvation's Elite. He will be joining us for our pre-champs show, where we will be diving into our bracket predictions. So definitely do not miss that, as I imagine there will probably be maybe some. I don't. I would be surprised if there's more roster changes outside of this Exceed for God Rex thing, but you never know.
You never know.
You never know. But that is it for us. I hope you guys all have a fantastic weekend, since we don't have any COD,
No
so
COD.
I hope you
Well,
find something to do before, but like you got a while before
hockey's
champs.
on.
But
You
what
know, hockey's on.
what's that?
Hockey.
Hockey?
Yeah.
Hockey's on?
Yeah,
I don't
hockey's
watch
on.
hockey.
I'm about to end this stream right now.
Okay.